Hi, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. On behalf of Senior Pastors Harold Lee and Debbie Gilmore and the entire congregation of Solid Rock Tabernacle, I would like to welcome you to the broadcast and extend this personal invitation to you to come be with us in one of our exciting Spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., morning worship is at 10 a.m., and Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study at 7 p.m., where we are taking a journey through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. I think you'll enjoy it. Join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma. We're church the way it should be, and we'll save a seat for you. Now, let's join our service already in progress. Huh? Yeah, something like that. Somewhere around that area. Chapter 4, verses 9 to 14. We're gonna. I don't remember exactly where we left off last week, so. We just gotten into. Yeah, we just gotten into chapter 4, so I don't remember exactly where we left off last week. So I'm gonna pick up at verse number 9 here. Okay. Deuteronomy 4, verses 9 to 14. Only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thine heart all the days of thy life. But teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons, especially the day that thou stoodest before the Lord thy God in Horeb, when the Lord said unto me, Gather me the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they shall live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. And ye came near and stood under the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire unto the midst of heaven, with darkness, clouds, and thick darkness. And the Lord spake unto you out of the midst of the fire. Ye heard the voice of the words, and saw no similitude, only ye heard a voice. And he declared unto his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments, and he wrote them upon 2 tablets of stone. And the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, that ye might do them in the land whither ye go over to possess it. So Moses basically is wanting Israel to remember everything that they had seen and everything that they had experienced the whole time that they were in the wilderness. The 38 years or 40 years that they were wandering around in the wilderness, Moses wanted them to remember everything that they had gone through. And this could refer to both the great miracles that they saw, because they saw plenty of great miracles, if you remember. But he also wanted them to know, just the miracles and the provision, but he also wanted them to remember the judgments that were carried out against them as well. See, it's good to remember the good things, but God wanted them to remember not just the good things, but when I had to slap your hand a few times, when I had to punish you for your unbelief and for what you were doing. So this pattern continues, and it's even strengthened in the New Testament. This pattern of remembering and both the good and the bad, okay? The faith of Christians is not based on speculative theologies, myths, legends, philosophies, but it is based on the real historical acts of Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, Jesus, we know, historically speaking, that Jesus lived. We see that through a lot of writings, not just Christian writings. People can't deny that Jesus was somebody who came to earth. They can't deny. They might deny that he's the Son of God. Some of them may just say that he's a prophet, but they can't deny that there was Jesus, that Jesus was there. And they can't really deny that he did great miracles, because those are well documented and well recorded too, not just in the Bible, but in other writings as well. Historical writings, Greek historians, Jewish historians, Roman historians, all have written about Jesus. Okay? In fact, even the Quran talks about Jesus, acknowledges Jesus. Doesn't acknowledge he's the Son of God, but does acknowledge that Jesus came and he did great works. Okay? So Israel was commanded to take heed to themselves, but they were not to think only of themselves. They were also supposed to teach their children and their grandchildren. And the goal of this training was that future generations would learn to fear the Lord. And because we say, well, you can read the Bible and everything, but they didn't have the Bible back then, right? So since they didn't have the Bible, the only way they knew about these things was passed down through word of mouth tradition. And a lot of that stuff still goes on today. I think we talked about it last week. Yes? They were writing the Bible at the time, yeah. Okay? And a lot of that still goes on today. These traditions still go on. I think we might have talked about it a little bit last week. The Passover. The Passover is a celebration of when the angel of death passed over. And they still celebrate that today. Even in 2026, they still celebrate the Passover. They still celebrate the Passover dinner. They still eat basically the same things that they ate then. All right? And the fear of the Lord is one of the most dominating thoughts of the Old Testament. Okay. It has to be recognized as the proper response of a man to God. Man should fear God. Now, fear doesn't mean that, like you're afraid of, I don't know, what you're afraid of some big bully that's coming by, or, the mass murderers or axe murderers or serial killers breaking into your house. It's not that kind of fear. It's a fear that you have of your parents. A respect and a reverence that what they say they're going to do. It used to be, it's not so much anymore, unfortunately, nowadays with the Gen Zs and all those other people. It's not as much that way, but it used to be that if a parent said that they were going to do something, they did it. If they said, we're going to go get ice cream, we went and got ice cream, because that was usually a reward for something. But also, if a parent said, you're fixing to get in trouble, you're going to get you can bet that you're going to get in trouble, right? And they don't do that now. Nowadays, it's a matter of people will go up, and I see it so many times in Walmart, especially in other places, where mothers will have their kids and say, you do that one more time, you're going to get in trouble. And the kid does it again. You do that one more time, you're going to get in trouble. And they do it again. You're going to do that one more time, you're going to get in trouble. And eventually the kid goes, no, I'm not. Yeah.
Not the exact same thing, but kind of could have started right before World War II, when Hitler seized all this territory. The Allies said that no more. But he kept doing it, and they kept doing it.
Well, yeah, but it's, with parents now, you didn't have people that when kids got in trouble, they threatened the other people would threaten to call the Child Protective Services and everything like that. Yeah, I remember one time we were in Walmart, and Mom was just laying into me. She told me to go to the aisle that had the fly swatters and get a fly swatter and bring it back to her because she was, you know. So she was wearing me out, and one lady come out and said, "What are you doing? Put more hip into it." So, you know, there wasn't, I'm going to call somebody. And everybody got to, if you were at somebody's house, you could expect to get that if you messed up over there, that your friend's parents were going to whoop you too. You know, but now there's not that fear anymore, and that goes on into the way the world is now, which is why we have so many people that all of a sudden when they do get sentenced to jail or prison for some reason, they can't understand why am I getting sentenced to prison? Because they've been let off so many times. You know, it is not, punishment is not a deterrent to bad activity or is not a deterrent to crime. It is the certainty of punishment. If you know that you're going to get in trouble, that's a deterrent. If you know you're going to get a slap on the wrist, that's not much of a deterrent. Okay? But the teaching of their children had to include Israel's experience with God at Horeb, Mount Sinai. Right? And this was an experience that happened some 38 years before the events of Deuteronomy. An event most of the ones that were there presently, knew only about it as children, if at all. Because remember, that old generation had to die. So now they're going 38 years later, that old generation is dying off, has mostly died off. And when all of this stuff happened, they were just kids. They were just young kids when all this stuff happened. Right? And some of them may not even been born at all. It's just like we're coming up on September 11th. 25 years. And y'all, you know, you young ones that are under 25, you've heard of September 11th. You know what September 11th was. I even showed videos of it. But you didn't live it. You weren't there. And you know, even though we were in Arkansas, you didn't experience the panic that was going through everywhere, the whole country, when all that happened. You know, you see planes flying around all the time. That was something else, and not a plane in the sky. Not a single plane in the sky. The only ones that were in the sky were a couple of Air Force jets and Air Force One. That was the only ones that were in the sky. Anybody else in the sky, they were getting shot down. Okay? But that's the way that it was. Okay? And this is, but we tell you about this, and we tell you about what happened on 9/11. We tell you about those things, but you weren't around to see to see what happened. I was talking to a guy the other day, and I said, I remember one time I was talking to one of my kids about history, and something that they were studying in their history books at school, and she was asking me about it, and I gave her a big explanation about it. She goes, "How do you know all of that stuff? How do you know about all of that?" I said, "Because I lived it. I was there." "You were alive when that happened?" Yeah, thanks for making me feel. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that stuff, and even there's stuff that even some of you who are older, some of y'all don't even remember the Cold War, because the Cold War ended in like 85, 86, something like that. You know, some of y'all don't even remember that. And it was a big thing. You know, everybody was worried about the Russians. You know, the fall of communism and all. But we have to teach people on that. Primarily, why do we need to teach people history? Yeah, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Right? And at Horeb, the nation of Israel heard God speak. And this was part of the experience that they were to pass down to their children and their grandchildren. At Mount Sinai, Israel received God's law. And they also entered into a covenant at that time with Yahweh. The law applied to Israel in the wilderness. While they were wandering in the wilderness, the law applied to them. Okay? Now, remember, when God gave the law, it wasn't supposed to be for the whole time. It wasn't supposed to be lasting this long. Because they were supposed to go, remember, there was only a few months away from Canaan when all this happened anyway. And then they decided not to go, and God said, fine, you're going to have to wander in the wilderness for 38 years. And that's what happened. And so the people, while they were wandering around in the wilderness, the law applied to them then. But ultimately, the law was given to them for their life while they were in Canaan, rather than their life in the wilderness. All right? All right, verses 15 to 20. Take ye therefore good heed unto yourself, for you saw no manner of similitude on the day that the Lord spake unto you in Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest ye corrupt yourselves and make you a graven image, the similitude of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged fowl that flieth in the air, the likeness of anything that creepeth on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the waters beneath the earth, lest thou lift up thine eyes into heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. But the Lord hath taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, even out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance, as ye are this day. So the commands at Horeb had to be obeyed. The law had to be obeyed. Okay? And they had to be obeyed when they heard the law, even though they didn't see any form of God. They just heard God's voice. They didn't see any form of God in any way. So because of that, God said you should never make an image to represent him and to worship that image, which is what they did with the calf. They made the golden calf to represent God, to worship him, okay? Israel was forbidden to worship any figure or image in the likeness of a male or a female. Man is made in the image of God. But even though we are made in the image of God, we are not God. And contrary to what some religions believe, we're not going to become gods. Right? And contrary to what some popular prosperity preachers say, we are not gods, little g gods. Right? There's only one God. And worship belongs to God alone. Not to any man, not to any woman, either in person or in likeness. Israel was forbidden to worship the creation of God. See, there was no animal, bird, sun, moon, stars, nothing that are fittingly worshiped, that are worthy to be worshiped. Nothing out there. What are you doing when you worship something? When you worship something, it's idolatry, yes. But what in essence are you doing? If we went out, okay. Well, if we went out and let's say, I'm just going to be ridiculous here. Let's say that all of a sudden decided, hey, we're going to worship chickens. All right? We're going to call it, we'll be the Bakbakites. But, You worship what are you doing if you're worshiping the chicken? You're worshiping the creature, not the creator. And that's what God's saying. Don't worship the creature, worship the creator. Okay? And because God had delivered Israel, he had claimed to their devotion. He rescued them. He delivered Israel. And because he delivered Israel, and they were his people, okay, God said, I have a right to claim your devotion. I have a right to expect you to be devoted to me. Right? Because, you know, in Asia, the Orient, it used to be that if you saved somebody, you were basically indebted to them, or they were indebted to you for life. If you saved somebody, if they were drowning and you went out and saved them out of the water, they were indebted to you for life. Okay? Because you gave them life. Well, God gives us life. And because God gives us life and he delivered us and he delivered Israel out of death, then he should be able to expect and claim our devotion. Okay? God doesn't deliver his people so they can do as they please. God delivers his people so they can do what pleases him. Okay? All humility is obligated to honor and obey God as the creator. And God's people have an additional obligation to honor and obey God as their Redeemer as well. All right. Verses 21 to 24. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me for your sake and sware that I should not go over Jordan and that I should not go in unto that good land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not go over Jordan, but ye shall go over and possess that good land. Take heed unto yourselves, lest ye forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make you a graven image, or the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God hath forbidden thee. For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. So it was for the sake of Israel that God disciplined Moses, not allowing him to enter into the promised land. Israel needed to see that no man, not even Moses, was above God's law. They also had to understand that it was indeed better that Joshua lead them into the promised land instead of Moses. Moses humbly acknowledged his sin and his failure before Israel at Meribah. And Moses also understood that Israel would succeed in taking Canaan without him. God's work among Israel would not end with the death of Moses. God would use Joshua to lead Israel to possess that good land. Moses knew that he was replaceable and that God's work goes on. Now, we see this today, don't we? How do we see it today? God's workers come and go, but God's work goes on. Okay? How does that happen today? How many of you have seen churches that have fallen apart because the pastor that founded them or whatever left? Okay? Good example of that is Harvest Time Tabernacle. Pastor Holden, Kemp Holden, knew him for years. Was a good man. I remember one time I was working at a gospel AM radio station, and he came on once a week to do a radio show. He did it live there in the studio. It was in Central Mall, up in the upper part of Central Mall. I don't remember the call signs and the call letters anymore. But he was like, it was coming time for him to go on air, and he wasn't there yet. And we're like, what are we going to do? You know, Brother Holden's not here yet. What are we going to do? And about 3 minutes before he was supposed to go on air, the door goes bursting open, and here comes Kemp Holden walking in there. And he said, and y'all all remember how much time do I have? I said, well, Brother Holden, you got 3 minutes. He goes, good. I have to repent. I had to speed to get over here. So he went in and prayed and repented for having to speed to get over there so he could get there on time. But when Kemp Holden left that church went down. Now it's growing again. It's getting back up again and getting to be one of the larger churches again. But when Kemp Holden left, the people left. Well, who were they serving? Were they serving God or Kemp Holden? Were you going to church to hear God, or were you going to church just to see Kemp Holden? And we see that in a lot of churches, because I know a lot of churches right now that if their pastor left, the church would dry up because they're not serving God, they're serving the pastor. They're serving the apostle or the prophet or whoever it is, whatever he's calling himself today. That's who they're serving. They're not serving God. You see, God's worker.
That's not all true. Yes, people go to hear a certain pastor preach, but then you bring someone else in. Well, I don't want to hear, so I'm going to find me a church.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
Okay.
you know, it's not that I've lost my faith.
No, but it's a lot of times, but you get a lot of people that will, because that person left, I'm going to go, and I see the people that go from one church to the other simply because the pastor goes from one church to the other, and they all follow him on that. They don't even give the new pastor a chance; they just follow him. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of places that there are places that do that. Now I'm not, and now there are not all of them are like that. And I'm saying, and it's one thing to say, well, yeah, we got a new preacher in. I really don't care for the way that he, the way he preaches or he ministers. So now I'm going to go somewhere else. Okay, that's one thing. But to say that, well, that's it. I'm just gonna leave because so and so's gone. So I'm going to leave now. I'm going to go somewhere else, or I'm just not going to go to church. And there's people that are like that. There's people that are like that will do that. But they're not serving God. God's workers come and go. The workers for God come and go. People will come in, people will go out. Okay? But God's work still goes on. Don't no one pony stop no show. Okay? That's basically the way it is. Moses knew that he was replaceable. Just like any of us should know that we are replaceable. Okay? God can do the work through anyone that he wants to. Anyone who's willing to do the work. All right? It's just hard to find people who are willing. But if a work ends with the death of the worker, it can be fairly questioned whether it was really a work of God. If that ministry ends with the death or departure of one person, then was that really a work of God? Because that work, if it's God's work should continue on. All right? Israel's success in possessing the promised land did not depend primarily on Joshua's skill as a leader. It depended more on Israel's faithfulness to the covenant that they had made with God and their rejection of idolatry. All right? Verses 25 to 28. When thou shalt beget children and children's children, and ye shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, and make a graven image or the likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of the Lord thy God to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that ye shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto ye go over Jordan to possess it. Ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. And there shall be, and ye shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. So Moses considered Israel after being in the land for many generations. Even though he wasn't going to be there, he was considering them. Having grown old in the land, if they started to worship an idol, creation itself would testify against them. It wouldn't just be man testifying against them. Creation itself would testify against them. And they would provoke God to anger. You know, it's bad enough to provoke your husband or your wife or anything like that to anger. You don't want to provoke God to anger. That's the last thing you want to do. Okay? But they would, if they provoked God to anger, then they would be destroyed in the land that God promised to give them. I says, okay, I gave you the land, but you're going to act the fool? Here you go. All right? God gave Israel the promised land, but he did not give them the promised land unconditionally. There were conditions that were put on this. If they persisted in idol worship, God would remove them from the land and scatter them among the nation. And you know what? This would happen some 550 years later, that exact thing, at the time of the Babylonian exile of Judah. But this would not be forever. God wasn't going to forever take it away from them. God would bring them back to the land as a testimony of his enduring promise to Israel. If Israel was scattered in exile, all right, then they would get their fill of idols. And God would put them in places that was filled with idols. So basically God's saying, okay, you want to worship idols? Here you go. Okay. I remember hearing some people talk about when they were growing up that their grandpa had a friend of mine tell me one time. He says, my grandpa caught me smoking one time. And I said, oh yeah? And he said, yeah. And he made me, and his grandpa smoked those Pall Mall non-filters, you know, Pall Mall red non-filters, the tough ones, you know. And he says, my grandpa got this pack of cigarettes and sat there and made me smoke one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. Because by the time I was done with that pack, I was so sick of cigarettes, I didn't want them again. He goes, because I was...
done that to her girl.
Yeah.
She saw them smoking and she did that.
He said, I was so sick. And that's basically what God's saying. You want idols? Okay, here you go. I'm going to give you so many idols, you're going to be sick of idols. And that's what happened. All right? And eventually, God would put them in a place filled with idols so he could bring them back to where they needed to be. Right? Verses 29 to 31. But if from hence, or from thence, thou seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find him. If thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul, when thou art in tribulation and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days, if thou turn to the Lord thy God and shalt be obedient unto his voice, for the Lord thy God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers which he sware unto them. So God is not going to completely abandon Israel when they're in exile. We see this played out many times. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. You know, we see all this play out with them. God didn't abandon them. They were there. But when they were ready to turn back to God, he'd be right there ready to receive them. This is the ultimate prodigal son, so to speak. This was kind of the inspiration for the prodigal son that Jesus, the parable that Jesus told. Okay? That they're going to go and they're going to squander and they're going to do all this other stuff. But when they're ready, they're going to come back. And most people are kind of that way. I knew that, you know, when I was growing up, I always said, as soon as I graduate high school, I'm moving out of here. I'm getting out of here. I'm out of 5,000 Giamatti. I'm out of here, you know. And the night we graduated, I got home after graduation, and my bags were packed on the front porch. And Mom said, "Bye." No, she did have them there, but it was a joke. But I think.
That's because she's pregnant.
Yeah. But even though I left and I was gone for a long period of time, I always made it home. I always came back. Okay? No matter where I was, it didn't matter where I was. Even when you had moved into a place and you had been living there, and you wanted to come back and see the parents or the grandparents or whatever it was, you wouldn't say, "Okay, well, let's go over there." You say, "Let's go home," because that's always home. See? And it was the same way with Israel. The promised land, Canaan, was always home. And God said, "Hey, I'll let you come back home when you're ready to come back home." All right? If Israel was to find the Lord, they had to seek them with all their heart and all their soul. And turning to God would lead Israel to obey his voice. The true, sincere seeking of God will lead a man or a woman to obey God. And if Israel turned to God in obedience, God promised to remember his covenant with Israel and to restore them. All right, verses 32 to 40. And we're on the downhill slide now. "For ask now the days that are past, which were before thee, since the day that God created man upon the earth, and ask from the one side of heaven unto the other, whether there hath been any such thing as this great thing is, or hath been heard of like it. Did ever people hear the voice of God speaking out of the midst of the fire, as thou hast heard, and live? Or hath God essayed to go and take him a nation from the midst of another nation, by temptations, by signs, and by wonders, and by war, and by a mighty hand, and by a stretched out arm, and by great terrors, according to all that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? Unto thee it was showed that thou mightest know that the Lord he is God, and there is none else beside him. Out of heaven he made thee to hear his voice, that he might instruct thee, and upon the earth he showed thee his great fire, and thou heardest his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved thy fathers, therefore he chose thy seed after them, and brought thee out of his sight with his mighty power out of Egypt, to drive out nations from before thee greater and mightier than thou art, to bring thee in and give thee their land for an inheritance, as it is this day. Know therefore this day, and consider it in thine heart, that the Lord he is God in heaven above, and upon the earth beneath there is none else. Thou shalt keep therefore his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee this day, that it may go well with thee and with thy children after thee, and that thou mayest prolong thy days upon the earth, which the Lord thy God giveth thee forever." So Moses ask Israel to carefully think about the days that are past and consider if God ever dealt with any other nation the way that he had dealt with Israel. Israel had a special place in the plan of God, and still does. And they needed to remember this. Israel was a uniquely blessed people with a unique role in the unfolding plan of God. Israel was a truly chosen people, just as they are today. But in a significant sense, they were not chosen for salvation. Okay. John the Baptist warned the Jews that being a descendant of Abraham did not guarantee salvation. Just because you're a descendant of Abraham does not mean that you're guaranteed salvation. Okay. Israel could know that the Lord was God because of all the amazing things that God did in the life of Israel. There's no logical, rational response to hearing what Israel heard or seeing what Israel saw and experiencing what Israel experienced, but considering who God is and all he did for Israel, obedience to his commandments made perfect sense. How easy would it be for us if we all of a sudden heard the booming voice of God and the pillar of fire and everything, you know? And this voice come down and said, I am the Lord your God. You know, we know that'll make us listen, right? Yes.
I think some people would still try to ignore it.
Yeah, there still be people who try to ignore it. Eh?
That's not it.
But obedience to his command makes perfect sense. And it made perfect sense. It's simply what should be done. For no other reason, you know. Why do you follow God? Because you should. You know? I don't, it shouldn't be that I follow God because he's done this for me and he's done this for me and he's done this for me. Well, yes, he has done things for us. He's done things for all of us. But we shouldn't follow God because he's done this and this and this and this and this for us. We should follow God because he's God, you know. Yeah. You know, we should follow God because that's what we should do. Yeah. You know, it's and when you think of it that way, it makes perfect sense. We should follow him because that's what we should do. Not because of anything else, not because of what he's done, but because he's God. Eh? And we're fools to disobey such a God of love and power. All right. 41 to 43. Then Moses severed 3 cities on this side, Jordan toward the sun rising, that the slayer might flee thither, which should kill his neighbor unawares, and hated him not in times past, and that fleeing unto one of those cities he might live. Namely, Bezer in the wilderness, in the plain country of the Reubenites, and Ramoth in Gilead of the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan of the Mashanites. So this was part of the commanded preparation for entering into the promised land. God commanded that 3 cities of refuge be readied on each side of the Jordan River. Okay? We talked about that a little bit before, that there were 3 cities of refuge. These were Levite cities. That they were supposed to be cities of refuge. That's where the Levites would be at, and that was where people could seek refuge, and they were cities of refuge. Here are the 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan. These are the ones that are appointed. God says, okay, these 3 cities, go kick everybody out, evict everybody out of those towns, and those are the cities that are going to be the cities of refuge on the east side. Okay? But Moses couldn't appoint all 6 cities of refuge because they had not yet taken the land on the western side of the Jordan River yet. Okay? 44 to 49, and this is the law which Moses set before the children of Israel. These are the testimonies and the statutes and the judgments which Moses spake unto the children of Israel after they came forth out of Egypt. On this side Jordan, in the valley over against Beth-peor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwell at Heshbon, whom Moses and the children of Israel smote after they were come forth out of Egypt. And they possessed his land in the land of Og, king of Bashan, 2 kings of the Amorites, which were on this side of the Jordan toward the sun rising. From Aror, which is by the bank of the river Arnon, even unto Sion, which is Hermon. And all the plain on this side of Jordan eastward, even unto the sea of the plain, under the springs of Pisgah. So this begins the second major section of Deuteronomy. This is the start of the second sermon of Moses to the Israelites. Okay? And this is the longest of 3 sermons in Deuteronomy. We're going to see 3 sermons in Deuteronomy. So when we get into, this is going to be getting into chapter 5, we're going to start seeing this sermon begin. Now, how long is this sermon? Y'all think I preach long? This sermon goes all the way to the end of chapter 26. So it was a long sermon, all right? So we'll start getting into that next week. And we'll go through the whole sermon next week. What do you say? No. We'll make it all the way to 26, I'm sure. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? We're done with chapter 4.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.